Listen carefully because what I'm about to say will shift how you understand attraction. When a woman reaches out to you, it's not luck, chance, or coincidence. It's a test. And most men fail this test within the first few messages without even realizing it. The uncomfortable truth is this: almost every man I know, even the ones who think they have it figured out, makes the same critical mistakes when a woman contacts them. Mistakes that instantly make them look weak, desperate, or completely forgettable. Mistakes that kill attraction before any real connection even begins. And here's the harsh reality: it's not her fault, it's yours. This is Liza from Secrets Inside the Mind, and today I'm breaking down the 7 psychological mistakes men make when a woman reaches out, and more importantly, how to avoid them. Because understanding the psychology of this moment is the difference between men who command attraction and men who destroy it. If you've ever had a woman lose interest after the first few messages and wondered why, subscribe right now, because this video reveals the psychological dynamics you've been missing. Keep watching until the end because the final insight explains why most men sabotage themselves before they even realize what's happening. Section 1. The psychology of the test. Why this moment matters. Before we get into the 7 mistakes, you need to understand the basic psychology of what's happening when a woman contacts you first. From a psychological perspective, when a woman reaches out, she's already curious about you. She's already made the decision that you're interesting enough to initiate contact. But here's the critical part. She's also testing you. Psychologically, she's assessing several things in that first interaction. Is this a man who has boundaries, or a man who is always available? Is he confident, or does he panic when given attention? Does he have a life outside of texting, or will he drop everything for her? Does he value himself, or does he hand over his power at the first sign of interest? Your response to her message communicates all of this without you saying a word. The psychology is subtle, but it's powerful. She's reading between the lines. She's noticing your energy, your timing, your tone, and based on what she observes, she's either becoming more intrigued or she's already mentally moving on to the next option. And this is why most men fail here, and they don't understand that this moment is crucial. They respond emotionally instead of strategically. They panic, overthink, or act desperate, and in doing so, they communicate weakness before attraction even has a chance to develop. The psychological reality is this: when a woman reaches out, you have a rare advantage. Most men spend their entire lives chasing attention that never comes. But when she shows interest, that's your window. That's your chance to demonstrate confidence, set the tone, and show her that you're a man who commands respect. And yet, most men squander this opportunity completely because they don't control their reactions. They don't understand the psychology of attraction. They don't realize that what they do in the next few minutes will either make her want more or make her disappear forever. Section 2. Mistake. Justification 1. Responding too fast. The psychology of availability. The first mistake is one of the most common: responding instantly. Here's the psychological principle. When you respond immediately to her message, you're communicating availability. You're telling her, without saying a word, that you were waiting for her, that her message is the most important thing in your life right now, that you don't have priorities outside of her attention. Psychologically, this kills attraction. It removes mystery. It removes challenge. And attraction thrives on a little mystery, a little challenge, a little uncertainty. Here's the harsh truth most men won't admit to themselves. Taking time to respond doesn't make you rude. It makes you thoughtful, controlled, and in charge of your own life. It sends a subtle but powerful signal. You have priorities. You have a world outside of texting. You're not going to drop everything just because a notification popped up. And women notice that. They respect that. That's what keeps them invested. Think about it from a psychological perspective. If she texts you and you respond instantly every single time, what does that teach her? It teaches her that you're predictable. It teaches her that you're always available. It teaches her that she doesn't need to wonder if you'll respond. She knows you will immediately. That's boring. That's not attractive. That's the opposite of what keeps someone engaged. But when you wait a bit, When you respond thoughtfully instead of reflexively, something shifts psychologically. She starts wondering about you. She starts thinking about your message throughout the day. She starts becoming curious about what you're doing that keeps you busy. That curiosity is what attraction is built on. The psychology here is also about self-respect. When you respond instantly, you're showing her that her attention controls you. You're showing her that your schedule bends to her messages. Psychologically, that communicates low value. Low value men are always available. High value men are selective about their time. A small delay, not hours, but maybe 30 minutes to a couple hours, communicates something powerful. It says, I'm living my life. I'm focused on my priorities. I'm responding to you because I want to, not because I'm desperate. Section 3. Mistake the nurturer 2, acting too available, the myth of presence. The second mistake is closely related but distinct. Acting too available throughout the conversation. Here's what happens psychologically. A woman reaches out, a man responds. Then, instead of maintaining balance, he immediately starts trying to continue the conversation. He keeps texting. He tries to fill every silence. He acts like her attention is the highlight of his day. Psychologically, this is exhausting for her. It's also demoralizing for you because you're training yourself to overvalue her attention. From a psychological standpoint, here's what's happening. When you act too available, you're removing all tension from the interaction. You're giving her instant validation without any effort on her part. You're handing her the power to control the dynamic of your communication. That's not attractive. It's the opposite of attractive. Women are drawn to men who have their own lives, men who have ambitions, priorities, and a world that exists outside of responding to messages. When you act like her message is the most important thing in your life, you're communicating that you don't have much going on, and that's a psychological turnoff. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Availability is not the same as attention. Being present is good. Being overly available is weak. When you make yourself constantly available, you remove mystery. You remove the natural rhythm of attraction. You make everything too easy. Think about this psychologically. How often have you been uninterested in something that was too easy? A task that required no effort? A person who was always there, always responsive, always eager? You were probably drawn to things that required effort, things that kept you engaged, things that had some element of challenge. Attraction works the same way. If she reaches out and you immediately act like you've been waiting all day for her, you've given her zero challenge. You've removed all tension, and tension is what keeps attraction alive. Keeps. Another psychological aspect of this is that when you're too available, you start to lose your own identity. You stop focusing on your goals, your hobbies, your friendships. You become consumed by the interaction, and women sense this. Like they see that you've lost your purpose, and that's a quiet red flag to her subconscious. He doesn't have control over his life. That's not attractive. Section 4. Mistake Circa 3. Overthinking every word, the paralysis of insecurity. The third mistake is one that traps so many men. Overthinking every single word. Some men treat a woman's text like a high-stakes exam. They analyze every syllable. They wonder if it's too casual, too flirty, too boring, too much. They spend minutes, sometimes hours, crafting a reply, convinced that if they get it wrong, she'll disappear forever. Here's the psychological reality. Overthinking signals insecurity. When you second-guess yourself constantly, you're not projecting confidence. You're showing her that you don't trust your own instincts. And women notice this immediately, even if your words seem fine on the surface. The subtle hesitation, the trying too hard energy, the carefully measured sentences, it all comes across psychologically. She can feel it in the energy of your message, and that's a huge turnoff. Think about this psychologically. She didn't contact you because she wanted a perfectly rehearsed conversation. She contacted you because she's curious about you, your energy, your personality, and how you handle attention. That curiosity dies the moment you start overthinking, trying to predict every possible outcome. Here's the harsh truth most men need to hear. You've been trained to overthink relationships instead of leading them. You've been conditioned to seek approval, to avoid mistakes, to say the right thing. And In the process, you've lost touch with the part of you that just knows how to interact naturally. Attraction doesn't come from caution. It comes from confidence. It comes from knowing your value and expressing it without hesitation. Overthinking also leads to a dangerous psychological cycle. The more you analyze, the more hesitant you become. The more hesitant you become, the weaker your energy appears. She might have initially been intrigued, but when your responses are too calculated, too cautious, too mechanical, the spark fades. Here's something most men ignore. Messing up a text isn't fatal. A typo, a joke that falls flat, a short or casual reply, it's human. Women respond to confidence and imperfection, not fear of failure. When you overthink every word, you forget that energy is more important than content. She can forgive the words, but she can't forgive the energy of insecurity. Section 5. Mistake, Sir 4, over-explaining and oversharing, the weakness of justification. The fourth mistake often goes hand in hand with overthinking, over-explaining and oversharing. Some men feel they need to justify themselves or fill the conversation. They send long, scattered messages packed with details she doesn't need. They feel compelled to tell their entire day story the moment she says hello. Here's the psychological principle. A woman doesn't need to know your entire life story when she texts, "What's up?" She's testing your energy, not conducting an interview. She's assessing your ability to be concise, confident, and selective. Psychologically, when you over-explain, you're communicating several things. First, you're communicating that you need her approval. You feel like you need to justify your existence or your time. Second, you're communicating that you don't have strong boundaries. You're willing to give away information indiscriminately. From a psychology perspective, men with high value are selective about what they share. They don't feel the need to justify their time or their choices. They're comfortable with mystery. They're comfortable with not explaining everything. Oversharing also creates an energy imbalance in the conversation. You're giving too much too fast, she's giving a little, and you're responding with everything. That imbalance communicates desperation, not confidence. Here's the psychological reality. Keep your replies short, confident, and selective. Let her ask questions if she wants more information. Respond to what she actually asks, not to what you think she might want to know. This communicates that you respect her time and your own. Section 6. Mistake number 5, losing your identity and priorities, the death of self-respect. The fifth mistake is one that many men make unconsciously, losing their own identity and priorities. A woman reaches out. Suddenly, your entire world revolves around her messages. You stop focusing on your goals. You cancel plans. You reorganize your schedule around the possibility of talking to her. You measure your self-worth by how quickly she responds or how much she engages. Here's the psychological danger. When you abandon your own life for someone else's attention, you're not being romantic. You're being dependent. And dependence is not attractive. Psychologically, men who maintain their own lives, their own priorities, their own ambitions are far more attractive than men who lose themselves in a woman's attention. This is because maintaining your own identity communicates several things. You have self-respect, you have boundaries, you're not desperate for validation. Think about this psychologically. A woman doesn't want a man who needs her to feel complete. She wants a man who's already complete and who chooses to include her in his life. There's a massive psychological difference between those two things. When you lose your identity, you also lose the thing that likely attracted her in the first place. Your independence, your confidence, your sense of self. You become smaller. And as you become smaller, attraction diminishes. Here's the psychological reality. Your life should be so full, so rich, so engaging, that a woman's attention is an addition to it, not the center of it. When you maintain that perspective, you naturally communicate the right energy. You're not desperate, you're selective, you're confident. Section 7. Mistake number 6, seeking validation through her responses, the trap of external worth. The sixth mistake is about where you're placing your emotional validation, seeking it through her responses. Psychologically, some men tie their entire self-worth to whether a woman responds, how quickly she responds, and what she says. They feel a rush when she texts back quickly. They feel devastated when she takes time to respond. They analyze her messages for hidden meaning, trying to find evidence that she's interested. Here's the harsh psychological truth. Your self-worth cannot be dependent on her attention. The moment you make it dependent, you've given her complete control over your emotional state. From a psychology perspective, this is one of the most damaging mistakes you can make. It trains you to be reactive instead of proactive. It teaches you to value external validation over internal confidence. And it makes you vulnerable to manipulation, whether intentional or not. Women can sense when a man is seeking validation from them. They can feel when you're waiting for their response to determine how you feel about yourself. And psychologically, that's not attractive. It's the opposite. Here's the psychological reality. Your confidence should come from your life, your accomplishments, your character, not from whether a woman responds to your texts. When you understand this distinction, you naturally communicate the right energy. You're not needy, you're stable, you're attractive. Section 8, mistake. This to 7, abandoning your standards and boundaries, the final surrender. The 7th and final mistake is the most damaging, abandoning your standards and boundaries. Some men become so focused on keeping a woman interested that they lose sight of what they actually want. They agree to everything. They never disagree. They never challenge her. They become a yes man, hoping that compliance will earn her respect or commitment. Psychologically, this is the opposite of what creates attraction. Women are not attracted to men who have no standards. They're not attracted to men who will accept anything just to keep them around. They're attracted to men who know what they want and who aren't willing to compromise on their core values. From a psychology perspective, boundaries are attractive. Having standards is attractive. Knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less is attractive. When you abandon these things, you're communicating that you don't have value. You're communicating that you'll mold yourself into whatever shape she wants. That's not a partner. That's a doormat. Here's the harsh psychological reality. She reached out to you because she was interested in something about you. If you immediately start changing who you are to please her, you're destroying the very thing that attracted her in the first place. Boundaries and standards aren't obstacles to attraction. They're the foundation of it. Section 9, the psychology of control, reclaiming your power. Now that we've covered the 7 mistakes, let me talk about what all of these mistakes have in common. They're all about loss of control. Psychologically, when you respond too fast, act too available, overthink every word, over-explain, lose your identity, seek validation, and abandon your standards, you're doing one thing. You're giving her control of your emotional state and your behavior. And here's the uncomfortable truth. She doesn't want that control. She didn't reach out because she wanted to control you. She reached out because she sensed something interesting about you. And the moment you hand over your power, that interest dies. From a psychology perspective, attraction is built on a man who commands his own energy, sets his own boundaries, and maintains his own life. A man who's not desperate for validation. A man who knows his worth. A man who's selective about his time and his attention. That's the man who commands attraction. Here's the harsh reality most men won't admit to themselves. You're fully responsible for your own lack of success here. You can't blame her, blame circumstances, or blame bad luck. The problem lies in your own reactions, your own habits, your own energy. This is your wake-up call. You can't continue to behave like every other man who panics when a woman reaches out. If you want respect, attraction, and genuine connection, you need to understand that how you respond matters far more than how you approach. Engagement CTA Number 2, around 15 minutes. If you're recognizing yourself in these mistakes, this is your moment of awareness. Comment below and tell me which mistakes you've been making. Tell me how you want to change. And like this video if it's helping you see yourself more clearly. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now because this is the beginning of you reclaiming control. Section 10, the transformation from reaction to leadership. Here's what happens when you stop making these mistakes. When you stop responding immediately, when you stop acting too available, when you stop overthinking, when you stop over-explaining, when you maintain your identity, when you stop seeking validation, and when you maintain your standards, something powerful shifts. You become a man who leads interactions instead of following them. You become a man who's attractive because he's secure, not desperate. You become a man who commands attention naturally, not by accident. And from a psychology perspective, This shift changes everything. Not just how women respond to you, but how you respond to yourself. You start respecting yourself more. You start building genuine confidence. You start living a life that's worth respecting. The psychological reality is this: attraction is a game of energy, timing, and boundaries, not scripts or luck. Every message you send is a reflection of your mindset, your self-respect, and your control over your own life. Every mistake you make sends her a signal that you're not ready for the kind of connection you claim you want, but every right move you make sends a signal that you're a man worth paying attention to, a man worth investing in, a man who knows his value. That's the transformation that happens when you stop sabotaging yourself. Final section, the call to action, taking control. Here's my challenge to you. Reflect on these 7 mistakes. Identify which ones you've been making. Don't just nod your head and forget them. Commit to change. The moment you start responding with calmness, confidence, and self-respect, you'll notice a difference immediately. Women will react differently. Energy will shift. Interactions that once felt stressful will start feeling natural. But more importantly, you'll feel different. You'll feel like a man who commands his own life, instead of a man who's waiting for a woman to validate him. Here's the controversial truth I want you to hear. If you keep responding like most men, you will never experience the kind of attention, attraction, or respect you secretly crave. And that's not her fault. That's yours. The moment you accept that, take responsibility, and act differently, everything changes. Women don't want your panic, your overthinking, or your desperation. They want your presence, your energy, and your control. Wake up to that reality, own it, start living like the man she can't ignore. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.